Call a member for Balkan Mills.
Mr Speaker, I move that the House take note of the report of the Joint Select Committee on the Parliamentary Budget Office tabled on 2nd of December 2011. Mr Speaker, I rise to speak on the final report of the Joint Select Committee on the Parliamentary Budget Office, which was tabled on the 2nd of December last year. The Joint Select Committee was established to inquire into and report on the Parliamentary Budget Office. The committee was required to consider the purpose of the PBO and whether the terms of the Parliamentary Budget Office Act 2010 were indeed appropriate. The function of the Parliamentary Budget Office is to prepare costings of proposed policies, both in the lead-up to a state election as well as at other times of the year, as well as provide members with expert briefings on technical, fiscal and economic matters. During the inquiry, the committee received 13 submissions from a range of stakeholders, including political organisations, business groups, unions, as well as international agencies. The committee held a public hearing during which it heard evidence from former Acting Parliamentary Budget Officer, prominent public servant Mr Tony Harris. Mr Speaker, I would like to pause here and highlight to the House that there was no other Australian jurisdiction to establish a PBO at the time of the inquiry. No other Australian jurisdiction had established a PBO. Many of the states around the Commonwealth of Australia had considered it and decided that the opportunity cost of a PBO didn't meet the objectives. So therefore, the committee was unable to receive evidence from any other Australian Parliament. The committee did, however, receive a number of submissions from other jurisdictions around the world that had established comparable agencies to the PBO. Jurisdictions such as Canada, the United Kingdom and the Netherlands. Again, Mr Speaker, I pause to highlight to the House that these jurisdictions were in the federal jurisdiction. The committee found that each of these agencies performed somewhat different functions which reflected the needs and capacity and governance and framework of that jurisdiction. Mr Speaker, it is important to note that the majority of submissions to the inquiry supported the retention of a PBO, but no submissions proposed its abolition. The committee was keen to seek common ground from all stakeholders as to how promises were made by political parties and best costed by a reliable and independent authority prior to a state election. The committee questioned whether the government would provide any special advice as to how the state budgetary process works outside the existing options already available to individual members of Parliament, each of whom have access to their own research staff as well as the Parliamentary Research Service. The committee's final report made 9 recommendations. The 3 key recommendations of the report were: 1, that parliamentary leaders be required to submit all of their publicly announced election promises for costings by the Parliamentary Budget Office. 2, that the PBO operate for a period of 6 months prior to each election, and the sole function of the PBO was to prepare election costings. Other recommendations included permitting a PBO to release more than one budget impact statement, amend the Act to clarify the content of budget impact statements, and appoint a single joint committee to review the report and activities. I believe these recommendations provide transparency and value for money, and I look forward to the O'Farrell government's response to this inquiry. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the stakeholders who participated in the inquiry. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge Tony Harris, whose contribution to the inquiry was beneficial. I'd acknowledge the work of Chris Holstein and Darren Webber, the members for Gosford and Wyong, who were there. And I'm sorry that many of the Labor MPs chose not to come to the House while this event is being noted. Although the member for Cessnock is here, whose contribution is acknowledged. I commend the report to the House and would like to thank my fellow committee members for their contributions to the inquiry. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Order. The time now being 1:30, consideration of the report stands postponed. I will now leave the chair until 2:15.